Live from MMA Fighting Studios, this is Between the Links. And now, your host, Mike Heck.
The iconic voice of Esther Lynn welcomes you to a brand new edition of Between the Links. Thank you for joining us this week and last week as well. The feedback has been absolutely tremendous with the episode, the competition between Jed Meshew and Luke Thomas coming on, and it was amazing to have Luke, but I figured there's just no way I could follow that up. I couldn't put anybody in that position to follow Luke Thomas, so it just wouldn't be fair. So we're going to have a little banter fest, a Talking Heads episode of the show, and joining me to give his takes as only he can is Mr. No Gray Area himself, the Woody Page of MMAfighting.com, the great Jed Meshew. Hi, Jed.
I love that you're just like, yeah, couldn't follow it up, so Jed can take that L. Jed can be the guy to follow Luke Thomas. Happy to be here, buddy. Love talking about fights with you. And we actually have like a lot to talk about this week.
We do.
Which is nice.
Technically, I'm taking the L because I have to kind of talk about stuff too and not just host. But yes, we do have a lot to talk about. We'll talk about certain topics. We'll cover some news and notes. And if time permits, maybe we'll take a few questions from the peeps at the very end. But let's start with last weekend. UFC Vegas 69. And look, we're not going to spend a lot of time here, Jed, because this is not a great card. The main card was a really tough watch outside of two fights. We had some UFC roster casualties as a result of this main card, but the big thing to come out of it was Erin Blanchfield's big win. She submits Jessica Andrade in the second round, and the performance was great. She took a lot of risk early. She ate a lot of big shots. She landed some herself. She was very durable. She was a damn dog out there. She made Jessica work, and then boom, takedown in round two. Shortly thereafter, she gets the tap. And it's Thursday now, Jed, and this was obviously a massive win for her, and people have been talking about her, no doubt about it, but hosting Heck of a Morning multiple times a week, you kind of get a sense of what the community is thinking and what they're talking about and what they're interested in with the questions that they ask. And honestly, I thought I'd get a lot more questions about Erin Blanchfield. So I'm just curious, just from what you have seen, has this win, I guess, aged as well as you thought it might? Because I don't know if it is. Like, it's a great win, and I think people were clamoring for it after the fact, but it just, I felt like it would get a lot more attention this far into the week.
You know, I hadn't really thought about it, but that's kind of a good point, right? Because it should be getting all of the accolades. Like, who has done that to Jessica Andrade? Valentina Shevchenko. That's really it. Like, that's the only person who's really like just totally steamrolled Andrade like that. It does feel a little bit though like we've already moved past like, okay, well, Erin Blanchfield's super good. Cool. On to the next thing. And I don't know why exactly that is. I'm sure some of it just has to do with women's flyweight isn't a huge draw. Blanchfield herself, as talented as she is, how did I put this? Could use a little help in the personality department as far as engaging fans via the magic of television. And so it's just sort of on to new business, I guess. But I kind of thought that this would be a much more dominant, prominent talking point, right? Because I know we have a lot of stuff going on this week, but it's not like any of it's super good. So knowing what we have with Blanchfield on our hands now and kind of where this goes, it's interesting. I also think maybe the biggest part of it, frankly, that we just sort of have to accept is that Blanchfield isn't fighting for the belt next. It may be her next fight, but we still have this Valentina Shevchenko versus Alexa Grasso perfunctory match that we're going to have to get through. And then it can be full steam ahead towards the matchup that I think at this point everybody wants.
Yeah, she's doing the media rounds. She was on the MMA Hour yesterday, which is obviously a big deal. And she's been calling for the title shot. She also said essentially that if the UFC wants to give her one more fight, she would be down for that. And in the immediate aftermath, that I'm still on the side of giving her a title shot right now. Like if Valentina beats Alexa Grasso, throw her right in there and see how she does. And it's honestly, I'm stunned by this too. It's been kind of torn down the middle among a lot of the people that I've spoke with, fans in particular. Some just want to see her right into the title fight, and some want to see her get one more just for the extra experience. She's very young, get some extra reps in before she fights somebody like Valentina Shevchenko. And after the card was over, we were both on the post-fight show saying, give her the damn title shot. You've been on hashtag team title shot since Saturday. Have you softened on that at all?
No, why would I? What reps does she need? Who are these lunatics? Like, what are we talking about, people? She just beat, at worst, the number 3 flyweight in the world. Like, at best, you can put Jessica Andrade behind Taila Santos and, of course, Shevchenko. And I think a lot of people, myself certainly, had Andrade as the number 2 flyweight in the world. And she just dummied her. And I know that it's short notice, etc., but it's what there's nowhere to go. This is the same kind of semi-idiotic argument that people will be like, well, if you get that body triangle, you got to keep advancing position. There's nowhere to advance. She has maxed out the levels of advancement. The fact that Manon Fiorot is higher ranked in the UFC rankings is unimaginably stupid to me. Like, I can't figure out how she's number 4 because Manon Fiorot beat Caitlin Chukagian. Cool. You know who else beat Caitlin Chukagian? Jessica Andrade. And she did it way more impressively. So I'm not really sure what Manon's doing in front of Blanchfield at this point. Also, come on, Blanchfield would rinse Manon. Like, this wouldn't be close. There's nothing to do. Sure, if we were already locked into this Grasso-Shevchenko fight, and that wasn't happening till May, and Blanchfield wants to spin her wheels because she's young and she just wants to stay active, that's one thing. The fight's happening next weekend. we're almost there. We are less than 10 days from this happening. And so unless something terrible happens to Shevchenko after she beats Alexa Grasso or in the process of beating her, we're just doing this in the summer, guys. Like that, this seems very dumb. I have not seen this anywhere. Shocking to me right now, the words you're telling me, Mike.
I know. It's weird. Been feeling a lot of those calls this week. But should Valentina Shevchenko defeat Alexa Grasso, and she is heavily favored to do so, what would you guess would be the betting line for a Shevchenko-Blanchfield fight? Like, I think the Grasso fight, Shevchenko is a minus 600 favorite, somewhere around there. But do you think a Blanchfield fight might open closer than that? Like, how would you gauge?
It's definitely going to open closer than that.
Yeah. Where would you put it if you were the odds maker?
Oh, so if I'm the odds maker, I'm looking at her fights right now. And here's the thing, like the Taila Santos one, she opens as minus 625. No one was giving Santos a chance in that one. So I think we got to be tighter line than that fight. Jessica Andrade, though, she was still a minus 450. I think we still have to be tighter than that. What was Joanna? She was a minus 320 over Joanna to win the belt. And I think that's probably close to what we're looking at for Blanchfield, minus 300 something in there. And that's probably the right line because that's going to be a big enough action back on Blanchfield, plus 240, plus 260, something like that to draw interest in placing an underdog bet. But still, I don't know. If you get into the minus 200s for Shevchenko, that feels like a lot of people would bet on her minus 200 something, depending on how this Grasso fight goes, right? Like Shevchenko's coming off the Santos fight, not her best performance, certainly. I am of the opinion that was probably sort of a one-off because we've seen this over long-reigning champions historically. Sometimes you don't have your fastball. If you can win with your changeup and your off-speed game, then that's the sign of like a truly great fighter. And she pulled that off. I think we're probably more likely to get a fastball versus Alexa Grasso. And if that's the case, then maybe that line opens at 350 and that's sort of where it hovers. But if she squeaks by Grasso, she doesn't look great. If Grasso like gets to the back at some point, then this starts, the fight itself gets more interesting and the betting line as a result is going to get a little narrower.
And a cap off this past weekend, because I feel like they should be mentioned here. And I'm not sure if you actually went back and watched it or not. We gave you some homework to go back and watch certain fights, but you're obviously tapped into the social media world, the comings and goings of the combat world. You pay attention to MMAfighting.com.
Great website.
BKFC won the weekend by a lot. Did they not? Like when they have big cards and name value, they deliver. And this card was very fun and interesting, and a lot of storylines came out of it. We saw a lot of people get over, like Josh Watson. Nobody really knew who this guy was, knocks out Greg Hardy, and now everyone's talking about this guy and they love him. And obviously the main event was insane, but BKFC won the weekend by a lot. Did you get to watch any of it? And if you didn't, have you noticed just how much more people were talking about the BKFC card than the UFC card?
I watched a couple of the highlights. I have yet to watch the main event, which I've been told was quite watchable. So that's still on the to-do list, but I saw the Austin Trout, Diego Sanchez thing, saw Greg Hardy get flatlined. Oh, that just brings a smile to the heart, doesn't it? That was lovely. John Dotson, still being John Dotson just with bare knuckles is great. So yeah, but BKFC always wins, right? Like I don't know what the broader fan perception is of BKFC. I just can't really speak to that, but they certainly draw the most interest from our side of things, right? Like every time BKFC has a card of any substance whatsoever, one, you will note that BKFC does a really good job of never counter programming the UFC functionally or like anything good from the UFC. They don't run Knucklemania on the same week as like 285, right? They know what they're doing in this regard. And so when you're running this BKFC card against the worst UFC card in recent memory, which I think it's fair to call Vegas 69, is like on paper looked like it was that, and in delivery delivered that. You're going to have some success in general, but also just like people love this stuff, man. It's not entirely my cup of tea. I don't hate it. I'm not like morally opposed to it in any of that. It's just not super up my alley all the way. But I don't mind watching it occasionally. And some of the stuff, I mean, their pacing is great from everything that seems, because they only take like 2 hours to do it. And they always deliver pretty good action in my experience. So they continue. We were talking about this we were talking about this in the meeting the other day. We've got the NFL draft coming up. We're going to do a draft pod again, as we did last year. Last year, our fifth team was Eagle FC. They ain't the fifth team in the world anymore. So we kind of have an open spot, and frankly, BKFC might actually be the most appropriate organization in that tiering of, you've got the big four and then you're looking for something else. BKFC feels like it's right there, man.
Of course, I had Eagle FC in this draft, so I mean, I feel like I might be just getting a different team every single year.
You ran that franchise into the ground, Mike.
With John Jones and Francis Ngannou on the roster? How the hell
ran that franchise into the ground.
I was so confident in my squad too, but I mean, if I can carry these guys over into BKFC, I think I got a pretty damn good squad. But obviously, Vegas 69, that is a thing, and it's now behind us. But I think a lot of people are looking ahead.
I've ever watched, dude. That card was so bad.
Well, look,
thank God for Erin Blanchfield. Can you imagine if that fight was a snoozer? If the main event was a snoozer, this would legitimately be one of the all-time worst events that has ever been put on the UFC. Every main card fight was bad, but for the main event. And then the Hernandez Miller fight was pretty fun, but then that next stretch of 3 was terrible.
Oh, it was really bad.
Horrifically bad.
Well, I mean, if it did one thing, it made us more excited for UFC 285 next Saturday, but we do have one more stop at the Apex this Saturday with UFC Vegas 70. Bellator also back on Saturday. A bit earlier in the day is the return to Dublin, Ireland with Bellator 291. UFC Vegas 70 headlined by Nikita Krylov versus Ryan Spann. We have the return of Tatiana Suarez against Montana De La Rosa. Andre Muniz is back against Brendan Allen for the middleweight championship. Bellator headlined by a welterweight title fight between Yaroslav Amosov, what a story that man has been since winning the title and everything he's been going through in Ukraine, taking on Logan Storley, the interim champ, in a rematch. And now normally, Jed, and it seems like you want to say something, so I'll let you say it after I
just have to ask you a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
We got to talk about this middleweight thing because I love the concept. I want to say that I may have been the first person to say middleweight fight on one of our programs. This can't be for that belt, right? Andre Muniz is good. Like Andre Muniz is just actually good. So does he still get to compete for the middleweight title just because Brendan Allen is the sitting champion?
Yes.
You get to determine these things. I don't know, but I heard you say that on to the next one. And I was like, we got to have this out. What are the rules?
It's basically the 16th ranked middleweight is the middleweight champion. Krzysztof Jotko might be the greatest middleweight champion of all time because
he's the middleweight champion.
He held that title forever. Just kept knocking dudes off, and Brendan Allen beat him. So now by proxy, Brendan Allen is the middleweight champ, and Andre Muniz, because it appears that there aren't a lot of guys ranked ahead of him that are ready to sign that dotted line.
Ain't nobody trying to fight this
never
dude.
Been higher for this man.
I mean, I guess it's true. If he does lose, though, he'll still be a top 15 guy, but Brendan Allen will no longer be the 16th middleweight. A lot at stake in this fight.
I know.
Can you tell how great this card is that this is what we're talking about?
Well, I mean, and that's what's interesting about this question, because normally, Jed, when Bellator puts on a card on the same weekend or even the same day as a UFC Fight Night card, more often than not, Bellator has had the better lineup, more reasons to tune in over the UFC cards. It happened a lot last year. Happened earlier this month when Bellator 290 went up against whatever UFC card this was. So, I mean, we'll ask the question we usually ask. If you could only watch one of these cards this weekend, are you watching the Bellator card or are you watching the UFC card?
Oh, this one's easy. It's Bellator 291. Well, okay, I'm gonna take that back. Do I have to watch the whole card? Because if I can just watch one, then I'll watch Bellator. But if you're gonna make me watch 18 Bellator fights, then I will say that's too many, and I will choose instead to watch the UFC card because my time has some value to it, even if it may not be much. But yeah, Bellator's putting forth the better offering this weekend. And this UFC card is better than the previous weeks. There are actually some fights that I have some interest in. The main event is, Krylov Ryan Spann is relevant. I don't know if it piques your interest or not, but it is relevant. This is a fight that really shouldn't be main eventing something. It should be the co-main event to a fight night card, or like a fun fight on the main card of a pay-per-view feels like the sweet spot for it, but it's fine. We've got two top 15, 12 light heavyweights going at it. And a bunch of other storylines that matter. Andre Muniz is dope. Middleweight fight going there. Tatiana Suarez comes back after 5 years. That's important. Like, there's some things going on in that card, but top to bottom, there's also just a lot of filler. Bellator, by virtue of having 18 fights, has a ton of filler as well, but the main event it might not be pretty. I can't say that the fight will be great, though their previous encounter was really, really fun to watch. But Yaroslav Amosov, with that story coming back after over a year off because he was fighting to defend his homeland, is now returning unifying belts against Logan Storley. They already fought once. Very good fight. That fight, maybe we have a Logan Storley snooze fest, could totally happen. But if it's anything like their first one, only instead we get 5 rounds of it, that fight's going to be awesome. And it's easily the most relevant fight that's going on this whole weekend. And that enough makes it top for me. Well,
the good news about an 18-fight Bellator card is 13 of them on the prelims. And when you talk about pacing, there's no time to breathe. Oh, that's a great point.
We're getting some post-limbs with this.
But that's good. I mean, then your viewing pleasure because you don't have to watch the post limbs. Once the main
If I don't
card
have to
ends,
watch
that's
the
your
post
day.
limbs, then Bellator for sure. But like, there are other, even the prelims here have some stuff that, like, I'm not trying to sell you a bill of goods. This isn't something that you should care about, but there are things that have some interest, like Magomed Sharapov,
Yep.
little brother or homie. Why can't I think of that man's first
Zabit.
name? Zabit. There we go. Zabit's little brother, undefeated dude. Like, that's relevant. He's getting a squash match, a bunch of squash matches, ton of Irish fighters. This is basically the SBG card. They just took every SBG fighter and they're giving them somebody. Many of them are people that they are supposed to beat. But Charlie Ward is usually pretty fun to watch. Get after it in some regards. Charlie Ward, Mike Shipman should be fun. Co-main event's pretty good. Jeremy Kennedy, still like what I've seen from Jeremy Kennedy largely. Pedro Carvalho, always a tough out, good scrap. Peter Queeley's coming back. There's some other things to hang your hat on here as well, but largely this is being carried by one heck of a main event.
Yeah, the main event is great. It's the best fight of the weekend, no doubt about that. And the crowd is going to be on fire. Like, this crowd is going to be electric. And then the UFC's in the apex. That's going to make a huge difference, honestly, for the viewership and the viewing experience.
Can we talk? Can somebody just talk to Joe Martinez? I need you guys can just add us together if he's got social media, because I love the man. I think that he is better than Bruce Buffer. I love what he does. I think he's good. But I am absolutely begging him. You cannot do your traditional intro in the Apex. You cannot say, "Make some noise if you are ready," to a crowd of 7 people, because it just doesn't work, dude. They can't make noise. This is not a packed out arena that it works. And it kills me every week Joe Martinez is doing it, because the rest of it is sensational. But then he does that before the main event. And I'm just like, oh God, way to make a stark and brutal reminder that nobody is here for this thing.
I've come to terms with that. I just feel like he's talking to me. So I just
make noise in your house?
Yes.
Woo!
And if it's
get your
too
dog
late,
really excited.
If it's too late and the dog's not next to me, then it's a golf clap. It's a golf clap. But if it's like, yeah, if it's an afternoon card, then I'm all excited. But I'm glad you mentioned Jeremy Kennedy, because I am excited to see him back. He's coming off that Aaron Pico win, and I don't think he gets enough credit for that win, honestly. But like you said, there's a lot of up and comers on the card. The UFC main event is fine. It's kind of a weird one. Will it be a fun fight? Yes. I'm not completely sure what they're actually fighting for, but there are 2 ranked guys. But while
I'll tell you what they're fighting for, buddy. They're fighting for the light heavyweightiest light heavyweight. Because let me tell you, Nikita Krylov is about as light heavyweighty of a light heavyweight as you can get. And Ryan Spann is surging up the leaderboard to that as well. So I am happy to say this is for the inaugural light heavyweighty fight of the year.
Who knew in the last 8 minutes who would make this UFC Vegas 70 card even more compelling than it is on paper? And while Amosov Storley is the best fight of the weekend, there is no more interesting story than the return of Tatiana Suarez, Jed. She's fighting Montana De La Rosa at 125. I think this is picture perfect matchmaking, because De La Rosa has 0 Fs to give when she's in that octagon. She will go to freaking battle with Tatiana Suarez, and whatever happens, happens. Do you like the matchmaking? And like, is the layoff the biggest question you have about Tatiana Suarez? Because you talk a lot about age and athletic primes, and from everyone that I've spoken to that has watched Tatiana Suarez train and get ready for this fight, Suarez is on one right now. But this will be her first fight since 2019. She's 32 years of age now, which isn't old by any stretch. But is that your biggest question? What are your expectations?
It's the biggest question because it's the only question, but I don't have a lot of a question about this. Tatiana Suarez is going to come here and thump up Montana De La Rosa something proper. Like, she gonna give her the business, because she's really, really good at fighting. I mean, this was a woman who a lot of us were very, very confident in her being a future champion and potentially a multi-division champion, 4 years ago when she was able to compete. Even if she has done zero improvement over the last 4 years, if she is simply the exact same fighter that she was then, she is still going to win this fight comfortably and still is a threat to certainly take the strawweight belt, assuming that weight is something that she can manage. I know she has been adamant that that's where she's going after this fight, but it's just a legitimate, like, a problem at flyweight because look, there have been very few people higher on Erin Blanchfield than me. Like, I've been on the train from just about day one. I don't want to bet against Erin Blanchfield's ability to grapple with anybody, but if there's somebody who's gonna show her what's what on the floor, it's Tatiana Suarez. Like, that woman is no joke. So I don't have a question in how this fight really is going to look. If I have any questions at all, it will just be how good does Suarez look? Because I expect her to look excellent. And I'm frankly anticipating. Remember when Dominic Cruz was out for like 5 years and then just for the first time in his life, like, actually unleashed offense that was meaningfully meant to hurt somebody, and immediately just drilled. Dude, give me the Korean fighter's name. Takeo Mizugaki.
Yes.
Not Korean. Takeo Mizugaki. Yes, he came back after 4 years and just drilled Takeo Mizugaki. I think that we could totally see that from Tatiana Suarez here. She just come in and just roll right on over Montana De La Rosa and keep on, just get right back to where she was before she left off. And I hope so, because the sport will be much more interesting with her being back to where she was.
Like you said, she wants to go back to 115. She's been very adamant about that. We've talked about this a lot on Heck of a Morning today and earlier this week as well. If she goes back to 115, if all goes well, and I think a lot of us expect it to go very well for her stylistically, how would you match her up next? Would you just chuck her right into a number one contender fight, even if it's at 125? Or would you give her like one more against like a tough top 10 fighter with the name and just let her build back up? Because again, getting to 125, getting the win, that's huge. You've come back, you've overcome, but now you're dropping down to 115. Do you want to test it out, make sure she makes the weight fine, that she performs fine at that weight now that she's a little bit older, and then give her a number one contender fight? Or do you just say, forget it, let's just go? She fights, rematch Carla Esparza, somebody like that, and then just give her a title fight if she wins. Where are you at with this?
This is easy. I'm perfectly happy if she wants to stay at strawweight to stay at strawweight. For the time being, we can do the 125 thing later. And she needs to get right back in the title hunt. She was there right before she left, and then she left, and them's the breaks. She can also solve maybe not a problem, but a bit of a curious situation, right? Because we've got Weili Zhang as a champion. Still not entirely sure what lays ahead of her. It feels weird to give Amanda Lemos a title fight, given that Jessica Andrade just throttled that woman like a year ago, like 6 months ago. So you just do that. Amanda Lemos versus Tatiana Suarez, title eliminator. Bob's your uncle. If either woman wins, they are totally deserving of getting a crack at the strawweight belt. And it clears up that sort of awkward spot of Andrade having a W over Lemos, but Lemos being higher ranked in the division because Andrade has been bouncing around back and forth, et cetera, et cetera. So right back into the title picture. I'm not giving her Carla Esparza because that's just very mean to Carla Esparza, and she deserves better things to happen to her, than that one. But yeah, just get after it with her. There's no time to waste. We already burnt her. The 4 years of her athletic prime are gone. So hop two.
Does that mean Rose gets a title shot?
I'm just assuming that that's what's going to happen. It wouldn't shock me if it didn't, because of how bad Rose's previous fight was, but they really like giving Rose Namajunas title shots, and she does have 2 wins over the current champion. So I'm assuming that's sort of next up for Wiley. But honestly, I wouldn't have a super huge issue if Suarez blows the doors off on Taya De La Rosa if they were just like, sure, title shot, let's do it. I'd be fine with it. Like, that'd be fun at least.
Jed, we have a one championship card tomorrow as well. John Lineker, Fabricio de Andrade, a rematch from the no contest.
You have so much going on this week.
Yeah, the nut shot heard around the world. So what's your interest level in this fight, in this card as a whole? One on Prime Video 7.
So I will not be watching live because my family is actually coming into town tomorrow for this weekend, but I will probably, we're doing dinner tomorrow and I'll be doing that. After dinner, I will probably turn this on if I get home in time, and certainly I'll just watch the playback of the main event. The rest of the card, I'm not like, I don't know, Martin Wynn's fighting. Martin Wynn's usually pretty fun to watch. There's some other things happening on here that aren't bad, but I am very interested in the main event because, one, John Lineker's fighting. John Lineker has never been boring, like ever. Man is going to come forward. He's going to eat a bunch of shots and he's going to rip rib roasters at you, baby. And last time that wasn't going super hot for him against Fabricio de Andrade. And we'll see how it goes again. I am actually like pretty interested in this fight. We'll be excited to watch it whenever I get the chance to. And it just kicks off a good fight weekend, man. We got KSW, we got Bellator, UFC, all sorts of shenanigans going on, Mike.
You know what else is happening this weekend, Jed? Floyd Mayweather's boxing Aaron Chalmers. Like, that's a thing. But
yeah, that's super weird, right?
Super weird.
Just making sure.
The amount of traffic that stupid fight's going to get. But anyways, that's one thing. We have another boxing fight happening on Sunday, or let me frame it like this. We are as close to this fight as we have ever gotten after many, many, many attempts. Jake Paul versus Tommy Fury. Jed, I have to say, until somebody brought it up on Heck of a Morning last week, and I believe it was New York Rick, I totally freaking forgot this was even happening. And in fact, nobody brought it up besides that since maybe a week after the fight was official. And since it was brought up last week, no one has said a word about it. There just does not seem to be any buzz for this fight, especially in the MMA community. I have vague interest at best, but that might even be a stretch. Where are you at in terms of interest, intrigue with this fight? Do you care at all that Jake Paul is boxing Tommy Fury on Sunday?
I do. I'll get to that in a second. Because here is the problem with boxing Tommy Fury. It's this right here. I am not opposed to this matchup for a lot of reasons. I think, though, that what probably wasn't talked about enough, and what is a very real problem with this fight, is how we got here in the first place. Because, like, be honest, Mike, how much of this is that you forgot this was happening because you were less interested? How much a part of that is simply this is supposed to have happened twice before, and I just don't have the confidence that Tommy Fury is going to show up? Because I feel like that's a bigger part of it, because like I felt the same thing when Dylan Danis was supposed to box KSI. I didn't care about that almost at all, but I also just immediately wrote it out of my mind entirely. It's like, Dylan Danis ain't going to show up for that thing, so whatever, who cares? And then lo and behold, we were all correct in that one. And it feels like Tommy Fury is in fact going to fight Jake Paul at this point. But I was not interested at all in the previous week, because it was like, I don't know. Something's going to happen. Tommy Fury's not going to do this because he keeps fumbling the bag. Now, to hear Jake Paul tell it that they're doing a presser in like a couple hours, I think it seems like it's going to happen. And I am actually more interested in it than I probably should be, because like this is bad fighting, but Jake Paul is a part of my existence now. I didn't plan on this. It was not something I would have chosen, to be honest, but he is part of the lexicon, part of us. And so sort of by definition, I have grown more interested in where this career arc goes. At some point, we all expect it to fail. I don't know when that will be. And I could see it being Tommy Fury. I know some people on staff are adamant that Tommy Fury is terrible because he's not good. and that he is going to lose. And I suspect that that is true, but we were all wrong about the Anderson Silva fight. There were very few people in our sphere who were like, yeah, Jake Paul is going to beat Anderson Silva. Some people thought, but everybody couched it. And for a long time, we all said that was the fight to make because Anderson can actually box. And so here's something. We were all pretty wrong in that and how that fight looked, how that fight went, et cetera, et cetera. And this time it feels like we could be wrong either way, frankly, because everything tells me that Jake Paul should win this fight. But at the same time, it is very real that he has never fought someone who also boxes like as a thing that they primarily do and isn't, close to an AARP card. And that matters like a lot because Anderson Silva, like if you go back and watch that fight, and I have, Jake Paul beats Anderson Silva. I'm not here to dispute this. He doesn't look good for large portions of it because he's not actually very good at boxing. He's not bad. He's better than I am at boxing, but he's not a boxer. Like that is not where he's at with his technical ability. And Tommy Fury isn't either. But Jake Paul used a game plan to beat Anderson Silva functionally, which is smart. Like that's a full credit to him. But his game plan was simply to do stuff. Like I know Anderson Silva will not throw that much at me. And when he does, I am largely going to shell up and try and disengage because I don't have the tools to counter effectively, really. But for most parts, he just won't do anything, and I can outwork him by popping a jab to the body, staying at range, doing this. I don't think that plan's going to work against Tommy Fury because Tommy Fury doesn't do a ton either, but he is coached by really good people, aka the heavyweight champion of the world and one of the best fighters of this generation. Like they are going to know what to do. And more importantly, they're going to, I think, make Jake Paul be put into more uncomfortable situations if Tommy can do it at all. To say, let's see what Jake Paul looks like when he is forced to fight off the back foot, because I got to tell you, I doubt it's very good. I just do not see like that's being a good, like that's very hard to do. And to see a guy that isn't old and can't, and matches him to some extent physically, like these are real questions if you are strictly interested in the development of Jake Paul. And despite all my better judgment, I've kind of have gotten that way. And it looks like we're going to get this fight. And so I'm kind of interested to see what the hell's going to happen, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, you did a great job trying to sell it. I'm still vaguely interested at this point, just to see what happens. I just want to know the result. Maybe I'll go back and watch it later. But
if you're at all interested in Jake Paul's boxing career, this to me is an incredibly like relevant and important fight for him. Anderson Silva was it. Like that fight mattered, and he needed to take it and did it. This fight, and it didn't have to be Tommy Fury specifically, any youngish dude who also boxes and is like the same size as him mattered. And to that extent, this matters. Him fighting Nate Diaz, I will have zero interest in. I'll be very frank. That will mean nothing to me because he will beat Nate Diaz because he's enormous and Nate is already on the cooked side of well done. So like that fight will draw much more interest. People will be way more into it. I won't care almost at all about that one. This fight is at least going to answer real questions that exist about where Jake Paul is as a boxer.
I respect that stance. Did you ever watch Seinfeld? I mean, you watched Seinfeld, right?
Oh, sure did.
You know the episode where Elaine is trying to go to sleep and there's a little dog that just keeps yelping and she can't go to sleep. And then Newman and Kramer help her like just not kidnap the dog, but take the dog.
Kidnap the dog. Yeah.
They kidnapped the dog, dropped him off at a farm, and then the dog found its way back home. There's this little dog right outside my house. Like if the wind blows, this thing just starts yelping and it drives me insane. My dog has barked like 5 times during this episode. This dog is just not stopped barking.
I can't hear that dog at all. So
it's the same thing. Yep. Just yelping away. But
just letting you know.
Jake said recently, I think it was on the MAR, that he has to knock out Tommy Fury, that a win is not enough. And the way you are portraying this doesn't seem like you have to, that you necessarily agree with that he has to knock Tommy Fury out. Is a win enough here? Is a win enough to answer those questions, or does he have to like emphatically beat Tommy Fury in your opinion?
I mean, He probably needs to knock him out. Not for me, but like for his fan base. Well, that's the thing. You talk all that greasiness, you got to back it up to some extent or another. Like he's out here saying that Tommy Fury is an easier test than Tyron Woodley and Anderson Silva. He needs to at least put that man on his ass. Maybe he can't knock him out, but he needs to show out. For me, again, I'm looking at this kind of purely as a developmental thing. Like if he just goes out there and actually shows real boxing, then I'll be like, oh, cool, this guy's improving, because he is improving. Like he's absolutely improving. But you don't have to take this from me. Just go look up any of the Getty images of his fight with Anderson Silva. The number of still frames that you can see of Jake Paul throwing his jab and his right arm is extended back like he's doing a Superman pose. It's just like, that's really bad. Like it's really, really bad. And he gets away with it because he's young and athletic and he's fighting super old dudes. And that's how it goes. And I don't know that Tommy Fury is the dude to punish him for it, but if he can clean up his mechanics, then I can be, because at some point he's going to fight like a real boxer. Like that is sort of the end point here. And all of this is building up to this. He's going to fight Nate Diaz. He's going to beat Nate Diaz. I don't care. Apparently he's going to fight KSI. He's going to kill KSI. And I don't really care about that. He'll probably end up fighting Conor and he will beat Conor. Like I know these steps, but at some point he keeps saying he's going to be a world champion. He's super not. Let's be very clear. He's not going to be that. But at some point he is going to bite off more than he can chew. And I need to know how much money to bet against him when that comes. I need to know, and the only way to know that is to figure out if he ever learns to jab while keeping a defensive guard, if he can ever throw in real combinations or pivot off of attacks. And like, I need to see him do the things that you would expect to see him. And again, he's still super early in his career. It's not surprising he can't do a lot of this. But if I see that and he just undresses Tommy Fury for 8 rounds, like, then I'll be like, cool. Like, I'm impressed. Okay. The WBC is going to rank him. It's not entirely ridiculous, even if it is largely ridiculous, So that's kind of what I'm looking for here. I just actually want to see what he looks like as a boxer, because he has in fact gotten a lot better at this. He clearly is putting in the time and the work. And I am at this point somewhat invested in this journey. So let's see where we're going.
Yeah, you make an interesting point. We've come so far. We almost have to see how it plays out. Just don't fight Salt.
And we know it's going to keep going.
Salt Poppy, Jake Paul. Don't fight Salt Poppy. Don't do it.
Honestly, that fight, I would be absolutely fascinated by. Like, fascinated by. Salt Poppy has mitts, y'all. Like, I don't know if y'all been watching influencer boxing. I have been covering that beat for us for a stretch now. And the first time I saw Salt Poppy go, I was blowing up our Slack. I was being like, guys, I know this event is just dog shit. But Salt Poppy can shuck them, like for real, got them things on him. And New York Rick has come around. He watched the last one where Salt Poppy got the business going. That dude has mitts. I think he's considerably smaller than Jake Paul, but Salt Poppy can make some things happen in there. So I would watch the hell out of that stupid ass fight. And that's how they get you. That's how you get hooked, Mike. Here I am. If you had asked me 3 years ago, do you think that you would be spending real amounts of time talking about YouTube or boxing and like actually being interested? I would have been like, no, I have taste and class, but I don't. I'm a mongrel like the rest of you, and here I am. Give me Jake Paul versus Salt Poppy.
You've come so far, Jed. I remember when we were talking about Jake Paul.
I hated it.
and now here you are.
Triller got me. They hooked me. Triller hooked me with a kick-ass live event, and now here we are.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, I've done worse.
Well, we'll see what happens on Sunday. Apparently the press conference just wrapped up. I thought it was happening later tonight, but
they're in Saudi, so the times probably makes a little more sense for them to be doing it right now. But yeah. Did anything fun happen? Do we have notes? Oh, they are standing on stage holding a belt together. Look at that. Neither of them look particularly happy to be there. Man, Tommy Fury, that is a man who he takes a while to get ready in the morning,
Yeah.
Like that man doesn't just roll out of bed and go downstairs in his PJs. Man is going to take some time in the mirror. well coiffed young man.
Yes, that's a good way to describe it. Let's go to some news and notes, and then we'll take some peep questions. Speaking of Jake Paul, speaking of his interview on the MMA Hour, yesterday he said that he and Francis Ngannou have been in talks about the former UFC champion joining the PFL, and the talks have been pretty positive. Do you feel like this is a real thing, or is this promoter talk? Because even if you're not having multiple great chats with Francis Ngannou, you at least need to say you are to put the pressure on everybody else. What do you think? Do you think there's smoke to this fire, or is this Jake Paul just being a good promoter and just saying that everything's going swimmingly and just saying what everybody else is saying?
Probably a little of column A, a little of column B. Like, I would be really shocked if they hadn't reached out and had at least some level of contact with Francis Ngannou. And the PFL can offer him a lot. $1 million a year to just bomb on dudes, which would be sick. Share of revenue on pay-per-views, which still unclear Francis is actually a pay-per-view draw, but he can get there, certainly. And, a more equitable relationship with fighters, which is something Francis is obviously very interested in. Like, all of those things are real, and working. PFL probably has the most to offer Francis at this point in time, which is why I was so adamant that Bellator needed to come out of the gates storming with a blank check, because over time, I am not sure. Bellator can offer very similar things, but they don't offer Jake Paul and the connections that can come with being on a Jake Paul pay-per-view, for instance. Because I got to say, if I'm getting pay-per-view revenue, I would rather be on a pay-per-view where I'm splitting revenue with Jake Paul than headlining a pay-per-view against Ryan Bader, because I know which of those is going to do a lot better monetarily. So I'm sure they've talked to him. I'm also I suspect that a lot of that is just, yeah, we've had good talks. They've talked. I doubt that we're anywhere, because we haven't really heard any smoke as far as Francis signing anywhere or leaning anywhere. I know Eric Nixick gave an interview the other day, I think to MMA Junkie. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I think it was to MMA Junkie, where he said that Francis had was primarily interested in doing the boxing thing first. Like, that wants to be his next step. And that Anthony Joshua was a name, a couple other boxing names thrown out there. And, any of those seem plausible for him at this point in time. Tyson Fury, maybe not right now, but he's just got to pick his spot, because he's only going to get the one boxing match, maybe two, but he's probably only going to get the one. So he's got to find the right home for it. And I suspect he will want to do that without any encumbrance from an MMA organization.
Yeah. So all the talk out of that release in the interview was like, which MMA promotion is he going to end up with? And we all had our reasons and directions we felt this could go, right? And it seems like the only direction Francis wants to go right now is boxing. Big boxing match. I don't even think I'm sure he's thinking about where he's going to fight next in MMA, but he is focused on getting a big money boxing fight and nothing else. And I'm sure all these promotions have reached out to me, has had conversations with all of them. So it's February now, Jed. We're approaching March. If you were to take a guess, will Francis Ngannou's next MMA fight take place for the PFL, for Bellator? And I'm going to throw the UFC in there too, because if he boxes Anthony Joshua or anybody else, and John Jones goes out there and beats Cyril Gane, and we'll talk more about that next week, the fascination, the hunger for a John Jones-Francis Ngannou fight is even bigger than it was beforehand. Where do you think? Like, where are you at right now? I'm not confident in anything, but I think all these options are on the table right now.
I feel pretty confident that the UFC isn't, frankly. I think the UFC would have him back. Everything I have read and listened to just gives me the impression that Francis Ngannou cannot work with the UFC fundamentally, which makes sense and is okay. Like, they have competing ideals. This was not. I think to some extent it has been cast and is maybe even accurate as Francis wanted to box. The UFC said no, and that was the tension and the breaking point. And so maybe he goes and he boxes and he can come back and it can all be settled. I don't think that that's really it, because Francis, when he said, I wanted to box, I wanted healthcare and I wanted, a seat at the table and all these sorts of things. I believe that he probably means that. If you know anything about his story, you can understand why things like that, a better, more equitable relationship with the promoter would matter to him substantially. And he had the leverage, and he's also not an idiot. Like, he knows that the UFC isn't going to accept those, but he is saying them anyway because he wants them to know here's what it is. And maybe they do accept, maybe they don't, but he knows realistically what's going to happen. It felt like he always knew he wasn't coming back to the UFC because the things that he would want and need were not going to be there. And that's not going to change in the next 6 months, probably not change in the next 6 years. So I just don't think he's coming back to the UFC. I suspect that PFL is the leader in the clubhouse right now for him because they do have a pay-per-view structure, or at least they are working on that. I mean, they've done one, and that is clearly a motion forward with Jake Paul as part of it, because they don't have as good a heavyweight division as Bellator, but they don't have it. It's not like Bellator heavyweight division is very good either. Like, no one has a good heavyweight division except for the UFC, insofar as there is such a thing as a good heavyweight division. So he still gets to be on ESPN Plus. He gets to do pay-per-view revenues. He gets a promotion that will let him be a partner in the promotion, make him feel valued in the same ways they've done with Kayla Harrison. I suspect pretty strongly that PFL is the ultimate landing spot for him, unless Bellator and Showtime just write him a blank check and somehow help negotiate Andy Ruiz or Anthony Joshua or any of those sorts of fights, boxing matches that he's looking for.
Yeah. I don't think the UFC is a favorite by any stretch, but I do think, I'm not going to say they're probably 3 on the list, but Francis also said,
I wouldn't put them at 0.
Yeah.
I wouldn't put them at 0, but they are single digits in the percentage likelihood for me. It's very low that he goes back there. Next.
Yeah, I think it's those 3. I think it's those 3 and nobody else. As long as he gets to scratch the itch and then have those conversations, because he even said if the UFC just kind of met him halfway on certain things, he'd be open to discussion, but we'll see what happens. He has no landing spot yet. He's going to go box. He's going to make a floppity $1 jillion, and gosh darn it, the man deserves it. So it's official now, Jed Meshew.
Let's be real. We'd all tune in. We know what would happen. There's no doubt what would happen if that man boxed Deontay Wilder. 0 question in my mind how it would go. And I would shell out my idiot lizard brain $75 to watch the shit out of it. And so would all of you. So would all of us.
All of the fights. Fury, Wilder, Joshua, all of them. We're all gonna watch it. We may not watch a lot of them, but we'll watch the first one.
I'd watch 2. I'll definitely watch 1. I think I'd be willing to watch 2, and then we'd be done. Then I'd be like, I don't need to see him get knocked out by every good heavyweight. Just 2 will do.
Let's move ahead. Beneil Dariush versus Charles Oliveira is a go for UFC 288. The ink is dried. We were wondering if maybe they'll just pull Dariush from this fight, because it was talked about, it was rumored. It was never really done, but recently it is now done. They have signed the contracts. Oliveira confirmed it. It's been confirmed on both sides. We didn't know if they were going to pull Dariush to fight Islam next. Not the case. What do you think about this matchup, Jed? Now that we have some sort of graphics and both fighters are confirming that it's a go.
I don't know, man. What do you think, Mike? Let's start with you. What are your thoughts on this matchup?
I think Dariush is insane for taking this fight. I respect the gusto, 100%, but I think he's nuts for taking this fight. Once Makhachev beat Volkanovski and the ink wasn't dry, I would have just said, nope, I ain't fighting him, and just hope for the best. I just don't know why he's taking it. I just don't I understand. And I think the next thing we're going to talk about,
they're part of it. Him take it.
Yeah. And it's so crazy because, and I'll get,
that's the answer.
And I'll just add to this too, because this is a friggin' conversation and a half this morning on Heck of a Morning. Dustin Poirier has called for this fight with Makhachev, right? And how certain are you of that? Because I feel like he's right in the mix. If I gave you a 1 to 10 chance, is it a 5 or higher, or is it lower than that? Because I think we're at a 6 at this point. Because he's the bigger name, man. It's business. He's coming off a win. We've seen way worse title fights. If freaking Jorge Masvidal beats Gilbert Burns and Leon Edwards beats Kamaru Usman, they're going to book that fight in 5 seconds. They're going to book it. It's going to happen. So I don't think Dustin's out of this conversation at all. Not saying he deserves it more than Benny Dariush, but when did that mean anything in the UFC over the last 7 years?
Deserves got nothing to do with it, as the great William Money once said. I don't know. I think it's less than 50% that Poirier gets a title shot. From a timeline standpoint, here is where I'm coming from, right? Like, it wouldn't totally shock me, but here's the reality: Makhachev isn't going to fight until August. That's maybe July. Like, maybe they get him on International Fight Week, but I don't know that that's even something they're interested in, because my guess is his next fight is in Abu Dhabi. They're not doing International Fight Week in Abu Dhabi. They're doing it in Las Vegas because that's what they always do. But Ramadan's coming up. It's March to like the end of April. So he's not fighting before March, and he's not fighting, like, Ramadan ends at the end of April sometime. So he needs at least 8 to 12 weeks for a fight camp. So we're looking at May, June. He can fight maybe July, more likely August. So that just means it's Beneil Dariush. If Dariush beats Charles Oliveira, he's number one with the bullet. You simply can't deny the man. And I think that, frankly, that's why he's taking it. I think he recognizes the UFC is never going to willingly give him this fight. He will either have to wait until there are no other viable contenders, which at lightweight is zero. That will never, ever be the case at lightweight. Or he just has to get one more win. Gamrot is a great win, but it's not the same. Oliveira is that win. He gets it. You just can't deny the man. And so then he gets the next up. And that timeline works out okay if he's okay with the quick turnaround. He beats Charles Oliveira in May. He can turn around for an August fight with Islam Makhachev. And I think that that's why this is happening. I think that that is by far the most likely outcome to happen here. If Dariush gets injured, if Dariush loses to Oliveira, which could totally happen, I'm going to be picking Benny, but if he loses, then I think Poirier is next in line, with, the slight sliver that if Conor McGregor knocks out Michael Chandler, whenever the hell that fight happens, is that fight happening in like August or something?
We don't know.
I got it. Whenever that timeline sort of fits for them, which I think is in the late summer, maybe if Makhachev still isn't ready to come back, but I think Poirier is just number 2. I don't think the UFC is going to pull the trigger on anything at lightweight at the moment. I think we're probably just in a holding pattern for a second while Ramadan goes on, and then we'll get some clarity here. And my heavy belief is that we will get Beneil Dariush versus Islam Makhachev in August, probably in Abu Dhabi, and then that'll be that.
I hope Benny gets the title fight. I hope he gets it. I want to see it. I want to see that fight. But I also understand how the UFC conducts their business. And the UFC is making money. Endeavor's making money because of the UFC. But they ain't making $4.2 billion over the last 6 years. There's a big debt they got to pay off, and they want to pay it off quick, especially if they're interested in buying WWE, which some reports say they are. And that's another huge chunk of debt that's going to be on top of that too. So I don't know. It's going to be real interesting. And if Oliveira wins, Dustin's getting a title shot. So
no, that's the thing. If Oliveira 100%. Wins, then it's going to be Dustin in August. Like, it will be Dustin in August. It's going to be Makhachev in August, because there's no reason to do him in July, and he is not going to fight before then because of Ramadan. Like, there's just not how that's going to work for him. So it's going to be in August. It's going to be if Benny loses, then or can't fight, it will be Dustin. And then that'll be it. Or maybe Volkanovski decides to get off his high horse, actually goes and defends his featherweight belt in the next couple of months, because he says he wants to fight very quickly. He gets to call the shots. Yair doesn't get to say, we're waiting for Mexico City. Like, he has to fight him whenever he wants. Maybe he says, screw it, let's run this in May. 283 only has one title fight on it. Maybe Volkanovski says, all right, you guys want me to do it? I will beat Yair in May. Let's go do this. Pray to God Arnold Allen loses to Max Holloway so he doesn't have another featherweight that he needs to defend against. And then he can say, okay, pick me instead of Dustin Poirier. and maybe like a 5% chance Volk can slide in there. But I think we're looking at 60-40 that this is Benny, and then if Benny loses or is hurt, then we just get Dustin in August.
Yeah. Timing is going to factor into a lot of this, because if Islam wants to
timing
fight in July,
is the biggest part of this.
Yeah. If Islam wants to fight in July, it's probably not going to be Dariush.
It's not. It's not.
Unless he rinses Oliveira in like 2 minutes.
I mean, that would be cool. But yeah, I also just really doubt that Islam will want to fight in July, or that the UFC will, because again, July pay-per-view is International Fight Week, and it just doesn't seem like they care about putting him on that. That's going to be John Jones's first heavyweight title defense. It's going to be International Fight Week. John Jones versus Curtis Blades. Yeah.
If he beats Sergey Pavlovich, he's fighting Sergey Pavlovich. I think this is the only fight you could make, right?
Yeah, Curtis is going to run right on over Sergey Pavlovich. So Curtis Blades is finally going to get his title shot, guys. Yeah. Let's go. Or it's going to be Curtis Blades, Cyril Gane, and the UFC is going to hate the world.
Oh, man. Last thing, we'll go to the peeps. I have other things to talk about. We can save it till next week. But what's your favorite bet of the weekend?
Ooh, that's a good. Let me look at my bets right now. If we're looking for just confidence level, I just put the house on Tatiana Suarez. I feel great about her winning. Don't actually ever put your house on anything, people. That's a really bad idea. You should never gamble with money you're not willing and able to lose. I think my happiest bet, my favorite one, I'm going to be betting Jake Paul for sure. I think I really like this Logan Storley by decision bet. It's plus 240. And I think I favor Amosov to win that fight, but he has so many questions. I have far more questions about him than I do about Tatiana Suarez, both because the level of competition he will be facing is much higher. What he had to deal with, we haven't really seen that a lot. Like how often in combat sports in general is the reason you've been out for 2 years is your country got invaded and you were defending it from foreign invaders. That can't be more than a handful of times historically. What that does to your mind, your preparation, all of that. Like, you could tell me that we're about to get the best performance of Amosov's career, and I would totally buy it. You could tell me it's going to be the worst performance of career. Totally buy it. I just have no idea what to expect from him. And their last fight was so good. Amosov faded a little down the stretch. Storley is going to be there for 25 minutes forever because that's what he does. But he's not a big finisher. So plus 240 for Storley by decision, I think, is my favorite bet of the week.
That's nice. Yeah, that's going to be a great fight. I'm very much looking forward to it. And one more thing I want to say. One more thing I want to say about this Beneil Dariush thing. Please say something compelling on the microphone.
Never going to happen.
Oliveira. Just anything. Don't call it Elon Musk. Don't say I'll fight 9 more guys. Just say there's nothing else I need to do. Islam, you and me next. That's it.
Never going to happen.
You're not dumping on. Oh boy. And that could hurt him.
Thank Jesus. And then, he's going to talk about some charity work, and those are good things. Not in the world of fight promotion, but just not who he is, not who he's going to be. Never going to try and be interesting. He's fundamentally opposed to being interesting, and we'll see if he gets to Leon Edwards his way into a title or not.
But he is interesting. Like, if you watch him do interviews, he is interesting and compelling, and he's kind of funny. Like, he is interesting. But when the lights are on him in those moments,
he's interesting in the way Arnold Allen is interesting, and I love Arnold Allen more than most people. Arnold Allen is hilarious. He is hilarious. I'll watch that dude interview forever because he's just a good to hang. Arnold Allen is the dude that you would never be like, I need to call him to hang out with him every day, but you are always happy to see him at the party. You go to the party and he's like, oh, hell yeah. Like, I'll go spend 10 minutes. He's bringing stuff to the table and he's taking nothing off. Beneil Dariush is pretty similar. He's a good hang. He's got jokes, but he just isn't. There's a big difference between being compelling interpersonally and being compelling in front of a screen to millions of people, and they ain't built like that, and it's just they're never gonna be, and we have to accept that as part of their failings.
That is a great comparison with Arnold Allen at the party. Would you call him Arnie?
Dude, it's so
Arnold. Is he just Arnold?
No,
he's got to have a nickname.
He's Arnold. Actually, he's probably Arnold Allen. Like he has one of those names that I think you just kind of say it in full the whole time because it's alliterative and so it's fun. I was listening to, shout out to Luke Thomas, Room Service Diaries. He and Brian Campbell had Arnold Allen on when they went to England the other week. And apparently growing up, everyone called him Mowgli. Like all of the people in his village still Mowgli is the name, and Almighty is his fight nickname because somebody paid him for it. Like it was branding something, like somebody had an Almighty brand something and paid him money. And so he's just like, okay, which brilliant, absolutely phenomenal
100%.
way to market yourself. But like, I feel like he'd just be Mowgli. Like you just hang out with him. So you go to your friend's house for for a house party and he's just there and he's never like, I'm going to call Arnie. I'm going to call Arnold Allen and see what's going on, play around a golf with him. But every time you see him, he's like, hell yeah, I love this dude. He's a great guy. That's Arnold Allen.
Mogs.
Yeah, Mogs. What's going on? How you
What's
been?
up, Mogs?
You still fighting people? How's that going? Sick.
That's the best. All right, let's take a few questions from the peeps. Just a few, and then we'll get on out of here. There we go. Joseph Boza. After watching William Knight fight last week, does it make sense that he was like, so let's clear this up real quick.
Come on, you know the answer to that.
Right. But it's also important to note that he wasn't released. That was the last fight on his deal. The UFC decided not to re-up him. So it's not like he had 3 fights left on his deal and the UFC was like, go kick rocks. No, he fought out his deal and they just ultimately decided, which is not a big surprise, they weren't re-signing him. So yeah, I think we know the answer to this question.
Yeah, pretty obvious. I mean, there was no way. Let's be clear. They did not release him. They would have. Had that not been the final fight of his contract, I have zero doubt that he would not have been released after that.
I have a question. I have a question for you guys. If William Knight would have just ended up, just say, lost that fight and got knocked out in 90 seconds, he gets re-signed, right? He was a co-main event.
50-50.
Well, no, he wasn't co-main event, but he looks. He's a guy who looks good coming off the bus. The UFC loves that.
Great coming off the bus.
He looks like the bus. He looks like the bus. He looks like another bus coming off a bus. Like
he really does. That's a great way to put that, Casey.
He is the bus.
Bus. I mean, it wouldn't shock me if they re-signed him. But remember, he had to go through Contender Series twice. He got a stoppage win the first time, and they didn't sign him. They signed him after the second one, his Cody Brundage win. And it's not like every fight of his in the UFC has been a banger. He's had some. Alonzo Minifield fight was not the most fun thing to watch in the world. Like he's had some
the
good
Dow
performances.
fight too was bad. He just got taken down over and over again.
Mm-hmm. Like he's had some uninspiring performances. He's had some good ones, but on a 3-fight losing skid, if he had just lost like a normal fight, he would have had a much better chance. Certainly, right. I still kind of think they might have just been like, "Hey, man, go pick up a couple of wins and then come back."
But oddly enough, that's how he fights. Like he fights that. It's so crazy. Like I was there, like the last fight on his developmental deal before the Brundage fight. I was there live to watch it. He fought Rocky Edwards, who was mostly a welterweight for a lot of his career. And William was losing that fight. He probably lost the first 2 rounds. And then he knocked him out in the third, knowing that like, oh boy, I'm going to lose. And he went out and did it. It's just, man, he's such a interesting man and such a strange fighter.
Very mercurial. But like Casey, to your point, I mean, the same thing happened to Jordan Wright. Jordan Wright's contract is up. He's no longer with the promotion. I think it would have been pretty like Jordan Wright is in a pretty similar situation. He fought and lost. It wasn't a good fight, but he did just fight and lose on a 3-fight losing skid at the time. They just let him walk. I think it would have been the same, even though William Knight looks like a cartoon character.
Yeah.
Fair enough. All right, next question.
And apparently benches 500 pounds, which is insane.
Yeah, he's a monster. Olajuwon, if Volk vacates, who gets the title shot against Yair? The winner of Holloway versus Allen? Seems pretty clear.
1,000%. There is no one else that would get that.
Yeah.
I guess the better
I don't even know who
question
you
is,
could consider could get that over the winner of that fight.
will Volk ever actually voluntarily vacate?
No. I mean, if the UFC told him explicitly, if you vacate, we will give you a lightweight title fight, maybe. But I think if they came to him with that, yes, he probably would. He just seems to have zero interest in fighting, in defending his featherweight belt at this point. Like and to some extent, I get that. Like he tasted the high, and he wants to pursue it and solidify his legacy because he believes that winning the lightweight belt would do that. And he's not necessarily wrong in that regard. I say this, I feel like I say it all the time. And this is me directly appealing to you, Alexander Volkanovski. You're absolutely right. If you go up and you beat Islam Makhachev, you're a 2-division champion. No one can ever take that away from you. That becomes a thing. There are more 2-division champions. There are more champs in UFC history than there are champions who have defended a belt 7 times. It is a more common thing to do that. It is not the flashiest thing. You don't get the picture of you with 2 belts, but you can have the Demetrius Johnson picture with 12 belts, and it will age better. I promise you. Right now, a lot of people will be like, 2 belts, greatest fighter of all time, cool. But in 10 years, the same way, we are going to look back at DJ's run and be like, holy shit, man, 11 defenses? That is, if you make 3 or 4 title defenses, you are one of the best fighters who have ever lived, one of the greatest of all time in your weight class. And DJ had 11. You can do that at featherweight. Because right now, if you win the lightweight belt, you might be the greatest fighter ever. You still might be the best fighter anyway, but you will solidify a different part of your legacy. You will never be a better featherweight than Jose Aldo was. You will never be a greater featherweight if you just leave this division because you only have 4 title defenses, or 3 of them. No, it's 4. It is 4. You have 4, which is great. Jose has 9. You can do that. That is within reach, and it is a different kind of celebrity and acclaim. But I frankly think that it is a more enriching and a better one. And it's something that MMA fans and fighters have largely lost sight of because the idea of 2 and 3 belts is so appealing. Whereas owning a division for a decade doesn't have the same cachet for whatever reason.
I love that answer. And if I don't get to see Volkanovski versus Yair Rodriguez, I'm going to be pissed.
I would be sucked so hard. That fight rules.
It's a great fight.
Same, and frankly, I think Arnold Allen's going to beat Max Holloway. If he doesn't, then separate conversation. Assume if he does go and beat Max Holloway, everyone will want to see Arnold Allen versus Volk. Like, all of us will want to do it. These are fights. I want to see those fights anyway, frankly. Like, these are the fight. Do those things and then pursue the lightweight belt. But you can solidify a very different and I think a more substantive and better legacy by simply doing the thing in the weight class you have spent the bulk and the majority of your career, where your name, when you go into the UFC Hall of Fame, as you undoubtedly will, it will not be as lightweight champion and then featherweight champion. Even if you do win the lightweight belt, it will be the former UFC featherweight champion and the former UFC lightweight champion. Featherweight is your division. You can really do something that has almost never been done before if you just stay locked in on it.
Love it.
Great answer. I think that makes I think of GSP. GSP is known for the defenses of welterweight, not because he had 2 belts. That's
absolutely
cool and all, but it's about the defenses of the 170 belt.
That is the cherry on the GSP sundae. The sundae is the fact that he defended the welterweight belt 9 times. 10 times. And I get it, because at the time people gave him shit about, well, go up to middleweight and fight Anderson. No one talks or gives a shit about that anymore, because instead you can just look back and be like, holy piss, dude. Like, Kamaru Usman has defended the welterweight belt 4 times, 5 times, And we were just like, this is incredible. This is almost unparalleled, undeniable Hall of Famer, phenomenal fighter. And that's half. It's half of what GSP did. I'm telling you, nobody gives it the credit. There are like close to 10 two-weight champions in UFC history at this point. There are like 4 people that have ever defended a belt more than 5 times. It is such a small list. You can be on that list, and I just wish people gave that the credence that I think it deserves.
Yep.
I wonder how much of that is simply optics, in the sense that the UFC will give you
is.
2 belts, but if you defend a belt, you don't see GSP up there with holding 7 belts on his arm, so like you do in boxing. So I
think some of it is certainly that. I also just think some of it is like, it's real lizard brain derp stuff from the general fan base of, well, like, okay, we see it all the time. Champions get discredited for being dominant. It's like, well, that division sucks. Like, actually, no. It's filled with all the best people in the world in this weight range trying their hardest, and one dude is just way better than the rest of them. But it's a more digestible thing for people like, oh, small man beat big man, he best. Like, it's very caveman-y. Oh, small man beat big man, he best. Like, it's okay. It's just easier. It is a simpler thing to understand.
All right.
Do you have anything else?
Yeah, one more for you.
Mike, UFC New England rumored for April per Helwani. You going? Who's Pacaporta fighting? I've not heard this. That'd be pretty cool. I know they want to get to Boston at some point this year.
What event would that be?
20.
What's...
I mean, you can't do Sergey Pavlovich versus Curtis Blades there, can you?
That would be so fun. Just a whatever. I mean,
there's no main event for the 29th yet.
I say they're doing Holloway Allen in Kansas City for whatever reason. You can absolutely do Curtis Blades versus Sergey Pavlovich.
But Holloway is
in
like
Boston for whatever.
Holloway is a star like beyond MMA, so like it doesn't matter. Holloway can fight anywhere, and it makes sense. But Curtis Blades versus Sergey Pavlovich makes like no sense.
So
I'm looking at this.
They still don't have anything for the 29th. What main event would you put for UFC New England, April 29th? And I don't even know what venue they go to when they go to Boston.
I will say this: as of now, both of those dates are open, the 22nd and the 29th. But we do have playoffs to worry about as well, because the Bruins and Celtics are both going to be in the playoffs and playing an awful lot of home games.
Where do they do shows when they go to Boston?
They go to the Garden, the TD Garden.
They do go to the Garden?
They go to the Garden. I don't think they're going to go to Worcester or anything like that.
Yeah, I don't know if they can go to the Garden in April. That might not work out for them from a time standpoint, honestly.
Yeah, it's. I mean, who knows? I don't know what would actually headline it, but there'd be.
You should for sure.
Be a lot of Boston fighters. Oh, I would definitely.
I need you to go and be full Boston Mike the whole time,
dude,
just with the socks hat. Just go.
I covered the last.
I don't want you to go. I want Boston Mike to go.
Dude, are you kidding me? And if it's in April, that means we could play golf with fighters, and I could do Boston Mike on the golf course with fighters, which would be super fun.
Oh, should I try and do that for the Holloway Allen fight? You think I can get Max Holloway to go golf with me? Do you think Max is good at golf?
Incredible. I bet Max is good at anything he puts his mind to, Jed.
It's
Seems like that
true.
kind of
I just
guy.
don't know if he's ever played. I'm looking at the rest of his card. Who looks like a golfer that I could get to play 9 holes with me somewhere in Kansas City?
Max Holloway would play like PGA Tour 2023 with you.
Oh, I'd for sure do that. Do you think Azamat Mirzakhanov, he a big golfer? We thinking?
I mean, I heard he's a scratch. So
This could be. That would be the thing that would annoy the piss out of me. I go play golf, and Max Holloway's like, I've never really done this before, and then he's just like a single digit handicap first time. I'm like, you son of a bitch.
yeah, he starts our birdie against you. I'd be so pissed.
Oh, this is easy. Why do people think this is such a hard game?
Athleticism, it's a cheat code even in golf.
What you got to do? You hit it straight every time. It's not very hard. You just put it out there. It's easy.
Oh man. Yeah, that'd be fun. I don't know what would headline, but I mean, Boston Cards have had weird main events. We've had Sonnen versus Shogun. McGregor actually made sense headlining that card
the
against Dennis
time.
Seaver.
I'm trying to
DC,
think who would be the most
Stipe
obvious
versus
Boston
Ngannou headline there.
Who would be an obvious Boston headliner right now?
Fonts fighting Yanez 3 weeks before that.
Wait, when is Cater coming back? When is Cater coming back?
Probably not to the end of the year
enough?
at the earliest. Yeah, he doesn't think he'll
That
fight
long?
this year. Probably early next year. He's taking his time. He's in no rush.
Well, that would be the best choice. You do like Cater to Poirier or something, but if he's not fighting in April, then okay.
Paca Porta.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Is Parker Porter still under contract with the UFC?
First of all, how dare you even ask that question? And second of all,
he's lost a lot of fights in general. I know not in a row. I think he's like he's the heavyweight. Well done. Well done.
I mean, all right. I think you can hit the music. That's it for me, everybody. That's my
that's a great place to end it. Yeah. You gotta exit on that note.
All right, next week we'll be back to competition. I'm not gonna say it's gonna be more professional, but it'll be more competitive. So we'll say that. So thank you for joining us, everybody. And we'll be on the road to UFC 285. Yes, it's gonna be fun.
We give the UFC a lot of shit deservedly. That's one of the best cards I've seen them put together in a long time.
Yes. We'll see you for a preview show tomorrow for UFC Vegas 70, and then we might even do a Jake Paul Tommy Fury preview show. In fact, we are. We'll see you then, everybody. Good night.
This has been Between the Links, an MMA fighting production on the Vox Media Network.